Okay, well, usual format, names, pronouns, and the icebreaker. And since this book deals with death, our icebreaker will be, what is one thing on your bucket list? And of course, I will go first. So my name is Jonathan. My pronouns are he, him. And one thing on my bucket list, it is like a mile long, but one of the things on it is to visit Istanbul. I am a gigantic cat lover, and from what I've heard, it like has hundreds and hundreds of cats. I gotta go and pet those cats before I die. Like I just have to do it. So that is one thing on my list. What about you guys?
Oh my goodness. I love that so much. I also love cats, and that might now be on a buck for me goodbye list too. Um, so hello, my name is Grace. My pronouns are they, them, and I would say one thing on my list is to well, one of my items got checked off, but there's a lot of beautiful places on Earth that I want to visit since I'm a geologist. So one place that I recently put on a list is that there's this national park in Australia that is a national geosite, and I believe it's called Pahululu. I am probably mispronouncing that, and I have to read it up on it again. But not only is it a geological heritage site, there's also beautiful, um, First Peoples drawings there that are about 25 to 30,000 years old. So I want to go see that too. And drawings as recent as apparently 1930s, because those folks that lived out there weren't like didn't know about the quote unquote like modern world up until that time, and apparently lived traditionally up until around like 30 or 40 years ago. And so that is in the anyway, I was watching a PBS special about it yesterday, so that's probably why that's on the first first thing on my mind. But now that's a new place that I really want to visit.
Okay, y'all have such specific ones. My name's Arian, any pronouns. And I don't know, my bucket list is just like doing something really adventurous in nature. Like I always imagine something like jumping off a waterfall or like exploring a jungle or something. Like very cartoony in that sense. But yeah, that's it, I guess. Or visiting Angel Falls if I had to name a location.
Nice. Maybe one day we'll all do our bucket list together because some of your guys' things does sound like a lot of fun. Okay, so I will ask, what did we all think of this month's book, The Seven Moons of Maali Almeida?
I thought it was super interesting, and I really liked it. I felt like it was too long. That's my only complaint with the book, is that there were certain sections of the book for me that I was like, I am very bored and I want to move on to the next moon. And then there were some times when I was like, this is the most engaging thing that I have read in a super long time. And so it was a really weird dichotomy. Um, but overall, I thought it was very well written. And the ending I thought was one of the few endings of some of the books that we've read that I actually liked it, but we'll probably get there. But yeah, that's how I felt about it.
Okay, I guess I'll go next. Um, I don't know if it's a me problem, and I just have a really hard time starting books, but I couldn't start this book for the longest time. I don't know what it was, but yeah. So the beginning to me was slowish, I guess. It wasn't that slow because you just died, but there's that. It really took me by like the first moon or second moon to really get into it and like start giving it like a good read. Uh, I agree with Grace that some parts really did just grip you, and then other parts were just, oh, okay, sure. Oh, I think the parts that were like, okay, sure, were like really um lore intensive or like stuff with the LTTE and JVP that I just kind of got lost by. But I felt like I could get by with the general understanding, like, oh, there's a civil war going on, and it's like, yeah, okay, I could roll with this. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you both said that because I have almost the exact same critiques. I will say, um, I'm landing on liking this book. I will say for about the first half, I was in a very much I don't like it category, similar to what you just said, Arian. And I literally have it here on my notes. The first part of the book is way too slow. And if you're not careful, you can feel yourself losing desire to read it. And that was definitely me. Usually, when I pick up these books, I am ready to like dive head in. I would read like 5 pages of this book, and I'd be like, okay, that's plenty for the next like 3 days. So there's that. I will say to give the author a few props, I really commend this author for choosing to shine a light on uh, the political scene in Sri Lanka in the 1980s. Based on what I've gathered doing my own little independent research, most of the things, if not all the things mentioned in the story, are true. I do believe, of course, names are changed, but outside of that, I do believe it's all true. Um, I also do like the fact I learned this just 30 minutes ago when I was looking at an interview with the author. Um, Maali Almeida's character is actually based on a real person. So that's also really cool. I don't believe everything that happens to Molly happens to the real person, but a fair amount of things do, from my understanding. Um, I also do like the fact that, like, pretty early on, the author is able to acknowledge this story isn't that original. Like, just the overall premise of it isn't that original. And like they kind of lean into that as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel, which I have seen some authors who've written similar kinds of stories do. Um, so yeah, all of that I will give them credit for. I also really did, like Grace said, I enjoyed the writing style. I think it was very strong. Um, Unfortunately, my list of cons is very long. I'll just go through a few of them quite quickly in a matter of time. Um, First, I felt like Arian said, the political stuff, don't get me wrong, I get it. I can definitely respect it. But it's way too much. There were times where I wasn't sure if I was reading a textbook or a fantasy novel. And that's really not good. Um, there would be like whole chapters where it's just politics. And I do consider myself someone who cares about politics and all of the things, but it's also like, I don't want to be in history class right now, respectfully. Um, I will also say, I just like the last book we read, I'm not the biggest fan of books that have a lot of characters that at the end of the story don't really matter. This one does that quite a bit. We have like 30 characters, only 3 of them actually matter to our story in the end. So there's that. I will also say that pairing with the book slowness, I do think the story is missing a lot of stakes for me. We're told very early on just how important it is that Molly uh, goes into the light by their 7th moon, but we're really not given any sense of danger as to what would happen if they don't. Yes, of course, that we know they can be taken by the Mahakali. Yes, we know they can roam the earth forever, trapped on earth. But for most of the book, Molly spends it hanging out with his friends as a ghost. And I'm like, that doesn't sound that bad. I don't really feel any sense of pressure to like go into the light. We get that towards like the last quarter of the book, sure. I think it's around the sixth moon, Maali begins to feel the danger of like being taken by the Mahakali. But I think we should have got a lot of that much earlier in the story. Um, and I've seen a lot of comparisons online with this book, with the movie Ghost. And I will say, just like that movie, this book has great, great potential. I think there's a lot of good stuff in it, but it's very messy. Um, so yeah, just leave it. I'll leave it there. Um, Also, one last thing I'll say is it's interesting that the author chose to write essentially every single character in the book as, I don't know if I would say bad people, but definitely not good people. They're people who, if anything, are decent at best. And they kind of expect for us to like root for these characters. Honestly, I found most of the characters to be kind of annoying, kind of insufferable. And that, of course, led to me not wanting to read it. Of course, I did, but I wasn't doing it very happily. So, okay, enough of my speech. Um, I'm curious, what did you all think of this book's use of second person point of view?
I thought it was good. However, I don't know, there was so many characters and also last names that just got involved. And there was so much, I don't know, I think you kind of pressed on it and talking that I was seriously so confused a lot of the book that I was like, I think I'm just gonna make up my own lore for what's going on and move on and move on. Because I was having to like the explanation of the JVP and the LTTE and all that. Um, After I read that, I wasn't really sure what I read, and then I like went back, and I think that was like the whole like textbook part, and I felt like the author kind of gave more credence to us that we knew exactly the scenario that was going on, but then also kind of figured we probably didn't, and then gave us too much textbook lingo. And so I liked it in certain aspects because I thought it was just really interesting how we kind of flew into one story after the other. But that was also my gripe with the story was because each chapter was technically a moon and there was really no breaks per se besides those like little headers that would and then I finally figured out that they were talking about those were probably different stories because we would go back and forth a lot. And probably I would say 150-ish pages in is when I kind of felt like I finally got my stride and was able to understand the second person point of view and what was actually trying to be um, conveyed through that type of storytelling. So I thought it was good. I just really wish there was less is more sometimes with the confusion with all these different characters and trying to remember all these different names. And then realizing I didn't, like you said, Jonathan, I didn't actually need to know most of them. They didn't really pertain at all. So, um, yeah, that's kind of how I felt about it.
So I guess I don't really take perspectives into account much when I'm reading, unless it's like super jarring and it's like super obvious. Because it didn't really matter to me. Um, but yeah, the names having like the full name as well, like first name, and then a full triple syllable last name appearing every time. That did take a bit of getting used to. But then yeah, I don't know. I think I just got used to it. Didn't really affect my reading experience too much, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I will say I did find the second person point of view a bit jarring. Maybe it's just things I read on my own time. I don't read many books that are in second person point of view. So I don't really have much to compare this story to in terms of how well the second person point of view works, unfortunately. But I will say it made for an interesting read. I do wish that as we follow the different characters, since we're not solely focusing on Maali and his point of view, that we would get a little bit more of their internal dialogue and like what each character is thinking while they're carrying out these different acts of terrorism, different acts of corruption, so on and so forth. But unfortunately, we don't get that, which I would kind of think would be the purpose of using something like second person point of view, but perhaps not. Um, so yeah. Now, to circle back to something I said earlier about most of the characters not really being likable or essentially very good people, do you guys think that was intentional? And what purpose does that serve for this story?
I definitely think it was intentional. I feel like at the start they were really trying to go for the um heaven or hell and purgatory lens, but I feel like that kind of got lost towards the end, or maybe it was on purpose, but towards the end it was they're they were really going for like this uh morally ambiguous take, because there are a lot of I feel like there were a lot of ideologies or kind of perspectives that they introduced. There was Senna, where you could like take revenge on your on anybody who wronged you in your life, and then there were people like Dr. Rani who was kind of move on with it, if I'm remembering that correctly. And then, there are other people who are just stuck in between, I guess. So I do think them being morally gray was definitely deliberate. Mm, But yeah, I don't really have anything else to say aside from these morally ambiguous characters. I don't know how to feel about them. Yeah. I guess I just like rooting for like your classic good guy with flaws. But I do love the complexity.
Yeah, I also feel like it was intentional, to kind of, as you're going through the story, I don't know, I felt like it was intentional because of the kind of heavy-handedness of the beginning of the book, like, oh, does heaven exist? Does like hell exist? If you're stuck here, yeah, does that make it purgatory? Is what is God? Is there multiple? And I think making the characters kind of insufferable and then, wondering if they were going to die or not, and you realize that everything is kind of like equal or equalized in this story was probably intentional, because I think there was one part of the book. Let me see, I think I wrote it down because I thought it was a really interesting line in the beginning-ish, whenever Molly says, if I don't know, or somebody says, if suicide bombers knew that they would be sitting in the same waiting room as their victims and that they weren't going to get what they thought or something like that, then maybe they would think twice or not actually do it. And I just thought that was like really interesting because then I think it was just kind of point out, good or bad, when people die, they're dead. And then they have to make their own decisions like after that. Um, and just I think also the characters being like morally ambiguous slash insufferable was also kind of show the hopelessness feeling of the 80s then as well, and the 70s and 80s, and like all these deaths and bad things that were happening and all these people that kind of gave up on themselves because of the bad things and then kind of gave up on fighting for their country, or then if they did fight, it was too much and then they would just, I don't know. I feel like the author was trying to say something, but there was a lot going on, and the ideas for me were getting really, really muddled. Um, and yeah, I really liked one of the characters to have been good. And like in the sense of, when you're reading a story, you're rooting for somebody because they're trying to be a good person and might be, have flaws. And so it's like I would never be friends with any of these people. And like in that whole story, I was like, no, absolutely not. You would probably just like push me off a cliff or something. And so I was, yeah. And so that was what I was kind of like surprised by, is that every single character, besides maybe the doctor that was helping him, uh, and the only thing that she did wrong was like not put him as a credit in his photos that he took. I feel like that was the only thing that was really brought up, which I thought was interesting. And then that was kind of it. So that's kind of how I felt about everything.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I really do think it's such an interesting choice for an author to craft a story where essentially you're not really meant to like anyone. I think it's very intentional. I would love to hear the author's reasonings as to why, but I'm not sure what they are. I will say that it does serve a certain purpose. I think it shows just how many people who were involved in Sri Lanka's political climate at the time, none of them are really innocent. They've all done little things here and there that contribute to this really dangerous, scary place to be in the 1980s. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's outside of that, that's all I can really think of. And even that is perhaps a bit of a stretch, but that's the only rationale I could seem to find for why these characters are all so unlikable. And like Gracie said, I wouldn't be friends with any of them. Uh, they would easily kill you to get ahead in life. So no, thank you. Um, okay, since we're talking about characters, let's jump into it. What did we think of Maali? General thoughts on Maali as a character?
He needed some help. Okay, like a therapist would have been nice. I think they dropped that Jackie referred him to her therapist. I was like, okay, where's the effort? Where's the results? Because like how are you gonna say you love someone and then cheat on them like almost every other chance you get? And you're even actively seeking that out. Like that was crazy to me. And then okay, I get it. He's kind of like a swashbuckler. He's kind of like, oh, a hanky-dory, mischievous kind of character. Charming, allegedly. And I could see it, I guess. Oh, they really pushed the angle of him. Oh, him gambling like that vice as well. Uh, ch- mm, yeah. And just before he died, like he was gonna turn a new leaf, like this whole shift. Like it really felt right this time. He was gonna quit it all. But that just doesn't, well, it can happen, but it just for his kind of character, I don't know if it's believable. I mean, yeah. Oh, there was something else I was gonna say, but I forgot it after I just yeah, they really pushed the his whole narrative thing going on, like the odds, the chances, and I kind of like that part, I guess. Like it made his character more cohesive, I guess, to me. Like, oh, okay, that makes sense. The odds of this and that, because he's a gambler, right? But yeah, that really irked me every time. every time I'd hear him or I'd read about him cheating, and I'm like, damn, it was like every other chapter. If Dee Dee was mentioned, there was gonna be cheating involved, and I was like, oh, okay, okay, sure, that's the way things go. But yeah, he good character to be morally ambiguous, I guess, because his personal life is whack, but then you have him, risking his life to take pictures of little active war zones to help better his country. So like, yeah,
Yeah. I agree, and I don't know how I felt about I don't know how I felt about him, just because at some points I didn't even know if he was taking photos to do the right thing or if he was just using photos because it was a quote unquote easy way to make enough money to go gambling. But then he did keep all those negatives that, so it's like, were you trying to blackmail so that you could get more money? Like, I couldn't put a finger on what Maali was, what he was, who he was. I think maybe that was the point too, because he didn't know. And maybe it was like the rush of gambling, whether you'd live or die, I guess, was maybe some of the background context to what he was doing. And because he even mentioned, I don't know if this is just like self-deprecation, that he wasn't really a good photographer, and that the guy, I forgot his name, who was helping edit his photos was the real reason why his photos looked so good. Then he ended up cheating on Dee Dee with that guy too. So like everybody was I guess what Aaron said, like swashbuckling around with Maali, like and I'm just I don't know. I thought he was an interesting character. I thought his relationship with his mother was very interesting. His relationship with his father was interesting, and his father was in Missouri. Um, Shout out to Missouri. I don't know why. Shout out to Missouri because I was like, oh, when Missouri was mentioned in the book, because that's where I was originally born. Um, and I don't know. It was just maybe he didn't know what he wanted, and so that's why in the end of the book he ended up helping other people figure that out. Yeah. The whole book I felt very indifferent to everybody, and it almost was like I was just watching people live their life. I felt like the book felt a little bit more voyeuristic than me being actively involved with the characters and especially um him. Like it just kind of felt like I was watching them do things and had no regard with how it went either way.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys on Molly. Yeah, it's hard to really even say what you think because he's just so all over the place. Um, yeah, I'm trying to like summarize my thoughts, but uh he was just so self-serving and selfish and hypocritical, and part of me does want to give him props, like Grace, you were just doing, for having the bravery to go into these active war zones and take these photos and whatnot. I believe the quote you were alluding to has to do with him saying that like he's not a great photographer, he's just brave. He's willing to go places that a lot of other photographers just are not because of the risk. Um, so yeah, I'll give him that credit. But at the same time, he does say like he has no real political allegiance at all. He will take photos and cover up or whatever kind of story he has to do just to get paid. So it's like, okay, are you a good person? Are you doing this for the right reason, or is it just what is lucrative for you and what supports your gambling habit? Um, And I love that you mentioned his gambling habit, Arian, because now that I'm thinking about it, I guess you can call him like a total gambler through and through. Everything he does is a gamble. His work, his relationships, his personal life. I mean, he talks about this fear of contracting HIV, but he's having sex with all these random men, and then one of the men he had sex with tested positive for HIV. So yeah, and then he says he only uses condoms with Dee Dee. So I'm like, okay, are you worried about HIV or are you not? You know, but whatever. Uh, I will also say that what's I going to say? Now I can't think of what I was going to say. Um, ugh, damn, that's so annoying. But yeah, that's how I feel about Maali. General thoughts on Dee Dee and his character in this story.
Yeah, the first thing that comes to my mind is a rich brat, and that kind of I felt like followed him through the whole story. Like not really listening to Jackie when she would say things that were true, not really listening to other people. I guess getting angry a lot when things didn't either go his way or having like hyper jealousy, but also he was in a relationship with someone that cheated on him every hour. So, I mean, that makes sense. Uh, I just didn't really get a full scope of like I guess Dee Dee was a swimmer. If I remember correctly, if I remember correctly, I don't. But then like for some reason Maali would sometimes body shame him in the afterlife. I don't know if anyone else caught caught that, but was just like, oh, he's gaining some weight. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Hello, you're dead, and also, what are you talking about? Stop it. And so I don't know if we really got a super good sense of Dee Dee as much as I would have liked, because I felt like we were just getting snippets of bad days because he was hanging out with Molly. And that relationship seemed weird. And then, of course, the relationship Dee Dee had with, his father and all that. And it's almost like Molly was trying to make him a good person by like having him quit and want to do things for other people. But then at the same time, Molly wasn't really doing that. So I don't know. That's how I felt about Dee Dee, was like those were my impressions.
Yeah, I agree. Like my impression of Dee Dee, um, quick to anger, I guess. Um, like kind of almost like a spoiled rich kid, I guess. Like it kind of made it hard to kind of be like to really go sympathize with him entirely. Uh, Molly kept saying that he didn't know a lot of things. And I don't know if he was just, if part of that was him being cheeky because he was able to cheat without getting caught, but also because he was just super rich that he was blinded or completely unaware of just some mundane type of things. The body shaming, though, I did pick it up, but I didn't even think of it like kind of body shaming. I just like saw it as Molly almost kind of recognizing the way how much time has passed between different iterations of him and Molly, I guess, because apparently they've known each other since high school. I don't know. The timeline was kind of off, but he was also morally gray. Like, sure, he wanted to save the planet, but then he, you know, he kind of stepped on other people too, I think, because there's this one comment that kind of shifted my view of him. Like, well, it was when they were at the getting the negatives photocopied, and they were like, he steps to the counter to look for Viraya uh with the kind of attitude that only a rich person could get. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, no, there's that.
Yeah, I agree with you guys on Dee Dee. I would say he's probably my least favorite character. Well, obviously, yeah, I said Maali is not very likable, but at least he's interesting enough. Dee Dee's unlikable and he's boring. Um, and I'm not sure which one is worse. um, and I remember what I was going to say before we talked about Dee Dee. I think the most interesting parts of this book for me are the personal relationships that we read about. Dee Dee, Jackie, Molly's mother, even Stanley. Those are the times where I think the writing itself and the story itself really comes to life. And I really wish you would have got more of that. Um, and yeah, with Didi, for me, I guess I was okay with him until the moment where he, Jackie, and Molly's mother go to the police station and they kind of like show off their privilege and their money because they feel as if because they're rich, their loved one's life matters more than the other mother's. That, interesting enough, made me very angry when I read it. I don't know if that's just a growing up poor thing or whatever, but that was like, oh my God. That is when I like said I cannot like Dee Dee, unfortunately. Um, so yeah. Now, like you guys were saying, there are several times in the book where Molly refers to Dee Dee directly as this entitled brat. He says literally entitled brat and rich asshole. And then he also says that the only thing his father ever gave him was a hatred for money and those who flaunt it. Um, what do you think of the hypocrisy of him saying that, but also dating someone who he can call a rich asshole? And why do you think he and Dee Dee are together, I should say?
I feel like Molly was kind of shallow, and he said that he really only liked him because of his dark, super nice dark skin. 10, perfect 10 out of 13. I don't really think there was, I mean, let's be real. Being a hypocrite won't really be another too much of a bad thing added to his list of qualities. So there's that. Um, yeah, just that he'd like the way he looked. Oh, and there was like a closeted gay in the afterlife who wanted to talk to him, but he was like, "Oh, I only talk to hot gays, like no uggos here." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, he's just vain."
Yeah, 100%. I feel like, yeah, Molly being a hypocrite wouldn't really be the super different, right, from his like character portrayal. And I think it was just a hot, rich kid that he could live with and that would put up with his stupid crap so that he could kind of live for free-ish and then only have to pay every once in a while and knew that if he needed to get out of a jam that his dad would bail him out. And we find out later, oops. But yeah, I think that had a lot to do with it too, is that, you know, being upset at the system for being set up that rich people get away with whatever, but then the proximity to that power, I think is really enriching for Molly's character to be able to do kind of like what he wants to do and feel like he kind of has a get out of jail free card on top of like having something on a really powerful like man, like Dee Dee's dad, and knowing that he like I don't know. I feel like there was some sort of like power dynamic there too in terms of um that whole situation. Especially kind of that's kind of how it felt when he was taking pictures too. Was there was that power dynamic of being behind the lens and being able to capture people's suffering, but not being directly involved with suffering until he got bombed and then wanted to quit after that. Because he didn't get saved or whatever. And so I think that relationship kind of reminded me of his relationship with like photography and the whole system as like a neutral, but being adjacent to that power was really intoxicating for Maali.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. The only justification I could find for why Molly allegedly hates rich people and all of that, yet chooses Dee Dee is because of Dee Dee's beauty. Every time he refers to Dee Dee, he just calls him the beautiful boy. It's never about his personality or, any of that. It's just he's beautiful. Um, so I think that's why they're together. And like you were saying, Grace, it's the proximity to wealth. I think he enjoys. I mean, we learned quite early on the primary reason that he remained friends with Jackie before he even met Dee Dee. Was that Jackie was able to get him into exclusive parties and to meet really, really cute boys and all of that. So I don't know. I don't think Molly really has any relationships with people that actually are anything deeper than surface level, unfortunately. Um, so yeah. And also I'm thinking about it a bit more, and I do think another reason why Molly likes Dee Dee so much is he says that like there are so few things that Dee Dee knows. He's clueless in almost every way because of his wealth. He's so used to getting his way, it's impossible for him to believe his boyfriend might cheat on him. Which is why he was blinded to the fact that, like, during one of their dates, Molly is having sex with a waiter in the bathroom, and Dee Dee has no idea. And he's like sleeping with all of his swim team members, and he doesn't know. He's like fucking one of his cousins. He doesn't know. It's like, yeah, for a cheater, Dee Dee is the perfect place for a cheater to be. Someone who is just that clueless. Um, so yeah, and I know Arian, you mentioned the possibility of like um towards the end of Molly's life, he makes his decision to like change and be faithful and whatnot. And if that's possible, for me, just based on what we've got, I would have to say no. I mean, Molly is having all of this sex in a country where homosexuality is illegal, punishable by law. And obviously, we know you can get murdered because a lot of these groups just kill willy nilly. Imagine moving somewhere like San Francisco where gay men are out and are like everywhere. He's gonna cheat nonstop. His dick is gonna fall off. Like, I don't believe he'll stop. But that's just my opinion. Um, Now, before we move on to Jackie, I do want to talk about something very quickly. Like 20 minutes ago, before the meeting started, I was watching an interview with this book's author, and he was talking, and I didn't know this. I'm embarrassed to say this author is not queer. I assumed he was. um, I'm not sure if he's heterosexual. He didn't say. He just said he doesn't identify as a gay man. So I don't know exactly what that means. But I'm curious with that information, how do you feel about his portrayal of gay men being someone who is not a gay man himself?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Um,
What?
right, like his focus on HIV, there's that. Like, fair enough, but like knowing that, I'm like, oh, okay, so gag. Okay, so in the context, removing the context of the story, the moral ambiguity, and hell, heaven, morality, whatever. You choose to write about gay people, and then you have them cheat like 24/7, and then HIV and AIDS, like Eddie almost. That is interesting, but I guess it's fine, kind of in the context of the story. It makes sense. The time period, sure, it checks out. Um, yeah, I guess I can't really. It was okay.
Is the call coming from inside the house because the character in the book also said that he didn't identify as a gay man? Do we remember that? Where he was like, no, 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 no. I don't consider myself any of that stuff. I just like boys. And I'm like, what? That's a weird thing to say. Is he putting himself in his own closet to kind of like help? And that to hear that, I'm like, did this person write this book because they had a lot of queer experiences and don't consider themselves to be a gay man? But eh, I mean, I would love people's thoughts on that because I am, yeah, where was that? Yeah, I'm a handsome man who likes beautiful boys, but I'm not gay. Are we being for real, Molly slash the author of this book? I don't know. I'm actually kind of flabbergasted that he would literally say the exact same thing that Molly said in the book in an interview almost, which is fascinating to me. And also, does he really think like gay men cheat that much? I don't know. I'm like I'm so curious now, but those are my initial thoughts. And that's pretty interesting that he would choose a character like that then. I'm gonna have to think about that. But that was my first thought is maybe the author should think about stuff.
It's so funny to hear you guys' reaction because I had the exact same one. And then, of course, I found out, I think he's out of the hot water now, but there was a period where he was like kind of canceled online for his portrayal of gay men in this book. So it's interesting to see you guys' reaction to it. Um, I don't know. It's so interesting because honestly, maybe I should be offended by his portrayal of gay men, but honestly, I have met a lot of Mollies. I've also met a lot of DDs in my life. So he kind of hit the nail on the head for those two archetypes. I will say, of course, obviously, we know the queer community is much larger than just these two types of characters. And I would have liked to see a little bit more variety. If you're going to be a gay man who's, I'm sorry, if you're going to be a straight man who's writing about gay men with such a stereotypical viewpoint. Um, but yeah, I guess to his credit, you know, it's not far off from some of the men I've known in my life. So there is that. um, okay, Jackie, general thoughts on Jackie in this story.
Okay, that's the thing. Like, no general thoughts on Jackie, I guess. Like, her unrequited love for love, I don't know. Okay, maybe love. Let's just say love. Her unrequited love for Molly was like the main thing. Like the complex situation with the three of them, their dynamic was okay. That was kind of interesting. Like I complex or like unrequited. Yeah, I love reading about that. So there's that. I don't really have much thoughts about her other than her always listening, her actually listening to Molly. Mm, I don't know. I get the sense that she was supposed to be cool, and I bought into it, I guess, her depiction of being cool, because like parties and being laid back and chill, going to the casino alone as a young 22 female in the 80s. Um, yeah, I don't know. She was just, she was there. I think she's the one of the least insufferable characters, up there with like the leopard and Dr. Rani. Because I can't think of anything too particularly bad about her, aside from her being like another rich kid that, yeah, but yeah.
So at the end of the book, I felt like so Jackie's the one that said that Molly was dead and kind of started that whole thing, right? And then she ended up getting fired because I didn't was Jackie a news anchor? And I missed that throughout the whole story until kind of like the very end because that actually did kind of confuse me. Was
From my understanding, she's an actress. I think she's in plays because she does some sort of late night show. But her girlfriend at the end of the story is the news reporter, and I believe she lets her get on air. And then after she reports Molly's death, she gets like rushed off the air by security, I believe.
okay. Yeah, because that part was a little confusing for me. So I felt like Jackie then at the end was I feel like the author was trying to say that Jackie potentially was either bisexual or, had feelings. Because I couldn't tell if it was societal, like like kissing on the cheek or whatever, versus like actual holding hands with somebody at the bar that a lot of like queerness kind of like happens and um so I felt like throughout the story, Jackie actually was growing up and trying to do the right thing because I think we meet Jackie when she's um, like young, rich, bored, trying to figure stuff out, but also as like a woman in this time frame where there's like all these different restrictions and just kind of wanting to like live her life. And then as things progress and at the end, she like really cares about Molly, and I'm wondering if it is like an unrequited love or if that's just like um like oh what's the word I'm looking for where compulsive heteronormativity where she's just around this guy all the time and likes Molly, but then kind of grows out of that and then maybe realizes that she likes a whole bunch of different other people and potentially women. um yeah, so I don't know. I thought Jackie was just really interesting, and I again, we have a male author that doesn't fully flesh out the female characters in the book. And I think it just accidentally happens this way all the time, where Jackie's character it ends up being a damsel in distress. They don't capture Dee Dee, they capture Jackie, and then Jackie has to be saved. And and so Jackie might have gotten her like lesbian moment, but like it was only alluded to, and we don't really we know that she is drinking, but throughout the whole story, she's the only one that finds the negatives. She's the only one that Molly tries to go into like her dreams. Um, and I just find that like very interesting that this person is pretty much the whole reason the story ends as well as it does. And the reason why like Molly actually puts himself in a position to be a better person at the end and just actually do something for somebody else to try to save Jackie. But again, it has to be like a damsel in distress situation. And I just think that's just so fascinating that all of these authors don't don't give us more with I mean, I feel like we got more understanding about the two male cops that didn't really do much than we did about um like why Jackie was in the position that she was. Like was she upset about women's plight? What was going on with women in the 80s in Sri Lanka? Like was she upset about not being able to, stuff like that. And so I wanted more out of Jackie's character. I thought she was one of the best characters, even though in terms of like being a person that I was actually starting to grow up. and try to do the right thing. But then these tropes just kept kind of like coming in, and then as soon as at the end of the book when they were just like going to kidnap Jackie, I was like, oh great, more trauma for women. I don't know. Was kind of how at the end of the book, and then I'm really grateful that it didn't go where I thought it was potentially going to go. And I was really worried about that, and that Jackie ended up saving the day again. But then we just don't acknowledge that again. And no, it's just very interesting. It's always like I feel like male authors use women as stepping stones for a story and doesn't actually make them a fully fleshed out character. And it's always a plot pusher and not necessarily a part of the plot.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I mean, like I said, I don't think any of the characters are all that great of people, and I also don't think they're all that interesting, but I think that Jackie is probably our best character in terms of morality. Um, Certain things she can improve on, sure, but for someone who's 22, I guess I'll give her a break. Um, I felt so sad for her for so much of the book because I mean, I think we all know a Jackie, a girl who's in love with her gay best friend. I've had Jackies in my life, and it's honestly such a heartbreaking, such a heartbreaking person to meet because they're in love with someone who they essentially can never have in the way that they want to. So they settle for whatever relationship they can have with the person. Um, so yes, there's that. Also, I'm someone who really enjoys when books about queer people, especially I guess in this case queer men, focuses on uh the relationship between a queer man and a straight woman. Obviously in the end, yes, Jackie's not straight, but for the most of the book we believe that she is. I think that's super interesting. I would have loved to get a lot more of that. And unfortunately, it really just boils down to Maali spending most of the book using Jackie as like a beard so he can be with Dee Dee without judgment, and then ignoring her for other parts of the story to the point to where Dee Dee has to like kind of beg Maali to show Jackie some attention. Um, so, and then of course, like you were just saying, Grace, it ends up being Jackie with the cape on who saves the day. And she's someone who's used a lot. That's unfortunate, but it is what it is. Book written by a man with the female character not fully fleshed out, fork found in kitchen, right? So, you know, okay. I know we talked a lot about the political scene of this story setting. I'm curious, do you think the information was impartial, or do you think that a lot of the information given to us by this author was bias?
So it felt biased to me, but I can't really put a finger on why. But as I was reading it, it felt like I was getting fed information from a single point of view through the whole thing. I think it's just also maybe like the narration choice and almost like it was coming from like that narration choice of people that are just so in what's going on that they really can't see maybe like the full picture. But to me, it did feel like it was coming from a biased voice. And that's just how it felt. But yeah, again, I couldn't tell you why I felt that way.
I don't really know. Um, like there's at the start where they gave like a little reporters or like abbreviation kind of notice, and they started defining all the organizations like the TT, the JV. pee and stuff like that. And they mentioned like, oh, all of these companies are like they do bad stuff for their goal. They all kill. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's like kind of an impartial route, kind of like a realistic lens. But I feel like no one could be truly neutral. Like there has to be some bias in there. But since I don't know history, I don't know what bias there is or if there are any like taking place. Um, but yeah, I wouldn't know if there was any bias, to be honest. So there's that.
Yeah, I would say that the book does feel biased to me. I think one quote that sticks out most to me is when Maali is going over the list of the different political factions, that he is like making a cheat sheet for one of the, I believe, American journalists that's coming to visit him. And then he, at the end, he says, if you're looking for good guys, no one's good. They're all equally as bad. Um, Now, of course, again, I don't know much about Sri Lanka 1980s politics. I don't know how true that is, but that to me does sound very biased. Um, so yeah, I'm curious what the information would have been had the author chosen to be totally impartial. Um, how would that have changed our story? I guess we'll never know. Okay. Now to skip ahead a little bit because honestly, for like the like middle parts of the story, I don't think there's much to talk about because it's all just history, which I think we've covered pretty extensively so far. To skip towards the end a bit, who did you originally think killed Molly?
Honestly, I had like no proper guess. Like there was I was like, oh, did his employee kill Molly? Did the minister Richard or something? And then yeah, I did not care enough to like at the start, I did not care enough to guess who killed him. At the middle, there were just so many players that I couldn't bother guessing who killed him. And then when they were like, "Oh, the silhouette," I remember that bathroom thingy. I was like, "Oh, did Dee Dee have something to do with this?" I think I got the perspective confused because I definitely got the perspective confused because at the end, the guy, Stanley, Dee Dee's dad, showed up at the bar, and I thought that was the night before uh, Molly got killed and Dee Dee did the pushing. I was like, oh, whoa, lover scorned? Was that his breaking point? But no, that was just a different time, and I got confused. To have it be Stanley, that makes sense, I guess. Did I see it coming? Mm, I could see it coming, but did I guess it? No, I did not. Um, yeah, it probably doesn't help how I binge this and like binge most of the book in like 5 hours. But there's that. Yeah, I did not guess it.
I didn't guess it correctly either. I thought it was going to be um what is the acronym? This the center folks, like something to do with a photograph, because they were just heavy-handedly talking about all those photos all the time. So I thought it was going to be maybe like one of those two. And then when it came down to the end, I was not surprised at all that it was Dee Dee's father, because um yeah, he just seemed a little off every time they had like interactions. I thought it was like very interesting. Um yeah, but I didn't think um yeah, I didn't really know, um, because so many people I felt like wanted him dead in a different way. And yeah, but that's who I thought originally that it was for sure.
Yeah, I hate to sound like the smarty pants. Oh, I figured it out, but I'm gonna be honest. The second we meet Stanley, I knew it was him. Um, I just think, I don't know, your partner's father not liking you is always really, really dangerous. It's always very, very dangerous. So like the second he's like, "Oh, Stanley and I never liked each other," I was like, "Yep, he killed him." But the annoying part for me, I think I mentioned this earlier, is that because we get so much political stuff and because um, we get a lot of flashbacks where Maali is in these different war zones and stuff. I think we're led to believe that he was killed by one of the political factions. And the fact that he's not, the fact that he wasn't, was kind of annoying for me. It essentially made all the political stuff one giant red herring. And I didn't like that. So yeah, I wish we were really just focused on the personal relationships, and then we could have really built up a lot of tension between Maali and Stanley. Um, Essentially, Stanley's reason for killing him is just he doesn't want Didi to contract HIV. But as we know in the end, Didi has a boyfriend anyway and still moves to San Francisco. So unfortunately, that might still happen for him, no matter what you do. So whatever. um, Now, I'm curious, do you think Maali attempting to stop driver Maali from blowing up the Department of Justice, do you think that one good action is enough to redeem him?
No, in my opinion, one good action does not redeem anybody, in my opinion. Broken clock is right twice a day, so it's kind of how I feel about when people are like, "Oh, this one person who's awful did this one nice thing because they had some clarity finally," and I'm like, "Okay, good for you." But that's kind of how I feel about anytime like someone who's portrayed as just like insufferable does something nice once, and I'm like, okay, anyone can do one nice thing once. It's the persistency of being a good person in the face of bad times that I think shows real character. So,
The thing is, I don't think he would have cared if he didn't die. I mean, he wouldn't be in that situation if he wasn't dead, to be fair. But like if he was alive, would he have done that? I'm not entirely sure. Um, but yeah, I agree with Grace. A broken clock being right twice doesn't really mm, yeah.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm kind of on the fence. I agree with you guys. Yes, a broken clock is right twice a day. Um, but I don't know. There's just something about Molly having that moment of realization that, like, hey, this is all wrong. And even though, of course, he's not a suicide bomber, similar to the driver, but he has done similar things before, and even now he's able to admit, okay, those things were also wrong. Um, I don't think that's enough to fully redeem him, but I give him a little bit of credit. I do think it would have been a bit more impressive had he successfully stopped the driver. Um, Unfortunately, he didn't, but yeah, I'm on the fence a bit more than the two of you. So now, in that same moment with the driver debating blowing up the Department of Justice, do you agree with Molly saying to Sena that in his attempt to bring down those who are corrupt, he has become just like them?
I struggle with this trope a lot in like movies and TV shows because it's like you have this person that does these super awful, horrendous, heinous acts that are causing suffering for like, say, like thousands or millions of people. And then you have people be like, don't stoop to their level. And kind of, I don't know, it makes me a little mad sometimes because it's just like, if you're gonna keep pushing people all the time, then they should react with the same amount of force if they've like exhausted all other avenues. And so I'm like stooping. I don't know. I'm always like, no. And I don't really like that in a lot of like books and TV shows because I just don't agree with it because I feel like eventually you have to do something in order to stop someone who's like unstoppable. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's complicated, but I would say my initial reaction would be no.
Whenever I think of that trope that Grace brought up, I think of the Joker and Batman. Like, okay, kill him once and you could save Gotham like a lifetime of trouble. But um I think Molly had did make a goodish point. I think like I'm paraphrasing like a lot here, but if you kill them, someone would just like replace them because there's like a power vacuum, and the person who replaces them might be worse, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't take action on them. So there's that. Mm, yeah, I think stooping to their, yeah, I don't know, but yeah, mm, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. It's definitely a tough question. It's definitely a moral dilemma. It reminds me of that like infamous trolley dilemma, like save one, wait, kill one to save five, or kill five to save one, whatever the dilemma is. Yeah, I mean, in some ways I agree. I mean, what bothered me most about the suicide bombing scene is Sana just having absolutely no regard for anyone in the building. But I mean, to his credit, he does say, like, yes, these people seem innocent, but these are also the same people who sign the documents that are falsified to justify why certain people are killed. These are the same people who get rid of photos. These are the same people who, they all seem like just basic pencil pushers working at their desk, but they all have some hand in the pot of corruption. So, I don't know. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Yeah. Okay, since you guys were able to agree that Molly attempting to stop that does not redeem him, I'm curious, do you guys think Molly deserved to go to the light?
Okay, so to my understanding, like anybody could go to the light. Like it's their choice if they go to the light. There's no restriction or there's nothing barring you from entering the light. But like if the light is like the equivalent of heaven, I guess there. Hmm. Hmm. I don't know. Like, okay, forgiveness, redemption, character growth, I guess. Um, mm, the ending was nice. Him entering the light, there being kind of like an open endish of sorts, but still feeling very conclusive. Mhm. I'd say, I guess so. Yeah, he did let's deserve to go into the light. Sure, I guess. It's a very, 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 very light deserve.
Yeah, I definitely think that the animal at the end deserved to go into the light. No, I thought the way that I was reading the ending is that he wanted, because of the incident with trying to stop the suicide bomber, he realized he needed to help people, and so he stayed behind like the doctor did and was helping a whole bunch of people make their journeys. And I feel like because of that, I felt like that portion of the story, which I would have loved to have been longer, that would have been a really cool, like take all the middle bits that were the textbook and put it a little bit at the end and talk about, different animals and all these different situations about people struggling with wanting to um essentially like not be alive anymore. And so I don't know how long he was helping other people, but I felt like that portion of the book is what made him um recognize that it was his time now to go into the light. And that the fact that he was led there by a, a cat, essentially an animal, I thought was like very I really like that ending so much. I really wish we got more characters. I mean, I would have read a whole book about that cat, but that's a, that's probably just I thought that was so interesting how that cat why that cat wanted to be a human. I forgot if it was a jaguar. I don't remember exactly what brand of large cat family it was in. Leopard, yes, thank you. And I loved that. Talking about how the leopard has no choice but to eat other things, and that if it were human, it could choose differently. If it had opposable thumbs, it could make lights, and that it wanted to experience that. Um, and yeah, I feel like Molly finally um felt at peace enough to enter the light. And I was kind of thinking in the book that if you were satisfied with like your life, or that you could eventually um have peace, then that's who would actually go into the light. And it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if anyone's ever finished or watched The Good Place. That's immediately what like kind of like came to my mind, was finally being at peace and being ready to let go, finally. Whatever that meant, which means that you're probably ready to go into the light, because people wouldn't do that unless that was the case. Is kind of how I felt in the end. So I would say yes, because I felt like Molly was actually doing good, consistently helping other people until he was ready to go.
Yeah, you guys said it perfectly. I agree. I mean, it is a tough call, but I will say hesitantly, he did deserve to go to the light. I think what saves him is his growth, his transformation from being selfish to being a little bit more empathetic, a little bit more willing to help other people. I think only someone who's had that level of growth can truly be a helper to souls that are wayward and are trying to decide if they want to go to the light, all of that. I would have loved to hear if Dr. Ronnie, the woman that helps him throughout most of the story, if she had a very similar transformation before she became a helper. Um, and yeah, I would have read an entire book about just him helping these like wayward souls. That would have been cool. But I don't know. Also, Grace, if you're interested in reading a story about a queer big cat that wants to be human, I would suggest you read Open Throat. Maybe you know that book. I don't know. The author's name is Henry, I want to say Hoke. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, very similar story. I believe it's a mountain lion. Yeah, mountain lion in Los Angeles who wants to become a human. Um, yeah, and he's also gay. So there's that. Um, um, yeah, what was I gonna say? And then in the end, it seemed like it was a bit open-ended, like you were saying, Arian. I was a little bit unclear if Molly was choosing to be reincarnated or if he's just going to go back and try a different drink and hopefully get a different result. That confused me a bit, but I think also by that point of the story, respectfully, I was ready to tune out. So I wasn't probably paying as much attention as I should have been. So that might be on me. Um, but yeah. Okay, since we're talking about the afterlife, and the book switches back between the real world and the afterlife so much, what similarities or differences did you notice between the afterlife and human life?
I thought it was interesting that their freedom of movement consisted on going with the wind or when people talk about you slash where your body goes. I feel like the main difference between life and death was like your, yeah, freedom of movement. I also thought it was interesting that this people, the suicides were at the same building and they just kept jumping or then like popping back up. And I don't know, I thought that was really interesting of like why they were stuck in that kind of like unreadiness to like move on or to maybe even go other places. Um it almost felt like the in between like was the great equalizer. So no matter who you were in life, everybody was just dead and they all had to deal with um the same circumstances and consequences. They either had to go here, anybody could get eaten by any of those creatures, and and I think that was the main difference because that anyone could choose the same choices also, unlike life. And that's kind of what the differences that I noticed that I thought were very, very interesting. And then also unable to speak, obviously, to the living and like what kind of consequences that has of just actually having to observe without getting involved.
Okay, so when everyone was dying, or when Molly first came to, and he was like just a confused soul, and like he was gathered up with like a bunch of other confused souls, not knowing what to do. Like I felt that, like I'm about to graduate, and I resonate with that completely. So in that regard, very similar to human life. Um, yeah, so it's just this. I guess in the afterlife, you're just anything goes. I guess like you could do whatever. You could stick around and stay. You could haunt someone. You could become evil. You could go to the light. It's just a free for all, and that's just oh yeah, that's yeah. So that was that. I just found that interesting and really relatable. Anything else, I think Grace already touched upon um how their method of being able to move or travel was by whispers of them being brought up and mentioned, or either them riding the wind. I thought that was really interesting as well. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I noticed a few similarities between the two. I mean, in the very beginning, the author says, like, yes, this place is just like that place, but only a little bit worse, which I thought was interesting. I think oftentimes, yes, I don't think the in between is meant to be heaven per se, but um, but it's interesting how it's really not that much more better or convenient than being alive. It actually seems a bit more confusing. Honestly, the entire office where you like first learn about what's happening, all of that felt like the DMV to me. And I'm like, that sounds like hell, but maybe it's better than it sounds in the book. I don't know. Yeah, that was interesting to me. Also, I thought it was interesting how the author uses this theme of you can still live as long as you're remembered. I know that's like a through line in a lot of different belief systems, the belief that like death only really comes when you're forgotten. So that was definitely interesting to see. It was interesting to see Maali be able to move, essentially anywhere he wants as long as his name is mentioned. And that he even still has that ability when he becomes a helper. Um, and in terms of differences, I was able to notice how, like, seemingly no matter what your financial status was when you were alive, everyone gets put through the exact same pipeline of having the ability to go to the light. One part I did find kind of confusing, though, similar to what Arian touched on earlier, is that there doesn't really seem to be a bad place. It's like everyone can kind of go to the light no matter what kind of life you lived, which to me, maybe it's just me being someone who really likes karma or, whatever, or really likes the universe seeking justice on people. Was kind of frustrating. I don't think that's totally fair, but okay. Um, yeah, yeah. I don't know. I didn't like that part. Makes me kind of nervous to die because I'm like, damn, I gotta go to the same place that like bad people go. Jeez. But okay. Now, lastly, before we move on from the talk about the light and heaven and all of that, what do you think of the author's decision to not really explain to us or show us or tell us who exactly God is? What did you guys think of that?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that the only thing that that the author alluded to was that God was a woman, because I think they used like she, her pronouns in the end for God, which I thought was interesting and like barely caught. And I felt like it was on purpose so that any reader for what, besides like maybe that specific gender marker, was that whatever the reader thought God was, they wouldn't be let down. And so I think it was definitely on purpose to give that kind of ambiguity so that the reader could fill in the blanks for like what we wanted. And I felt like that was on purpose. I just did think it was very interesting um to choose she, her pronouns. And I think that was definitely on purpose too, because it kind of felt like the author wanted us to know that's the part that the author wanted to be a finite truth, and then everything else to be filled in by the reader is kind of how it felt for me.
Um, yeah, I caught on to the she, her pronouns as well, but not being given like a concrete example. I don't really think much of it. Like, sure, like I didn't even think they were gonna show them, to be honest. Like, I already had a feeling. So when it didn't happen, and Maali just saw her for like a brief second, like no further explanation, I was like, okay, yeah, that tracks. Um, period. Like how you like yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was definitely interesting. I mean, I did, like the two you mentioned, I did notice that Molly at the end chose to describe God as using she, her pronouns. That was interesting to me. I know there are some religions, more so the polytheistic religions, that believe there are female gods. I'm not sure exactly which religion this book most aligns with, but I know that some religions do believe that. I thought it was interesting though, like similar to Grace, you referenced The Good Place. This book is kind of a mashup of like multiple different religions as opposed to like sticking to just one. I'm not sure if perhaps that's the author's own personal beliefs. I'm not sure if that's just him being like, hey, look, I already made people mad enough by being a straight man writing a gay book. I also don't want to piss off the religious people. So I'm going to not open that can of worms. But it's interesting to me that he chose to really not give much context or example as to who this God that we're kind of like building up to for most of the story is. Um, yeah, something interesting. Now, I'm curious, considering that Mali's entire goal with having his negatives published is to bring down the corruption in Sri Lanka, how successful do you think he was in doing that by having his art gallery?
Okay, I don't know if like I've read it right because that was towards the end of the book and I was already like nodding off. Like I was already like not fully there. But it flopped, didn't it? Like barely anybody showed up. People took pics and stuff. Um, and it didn't really work. Because the minister was still there and stuff like that. But left they kind of left like a hint with Jackie calling Maali's like half sister in US about the her copy of the negatives, and I feel like that was just alluding to the possibility of it becoming a much bigger thing and actually uh, doing the change or doing the intended effect that Maali wanted, but it didn't really do much as the as
Yeah, I agree. I felt like the author wanted to intentionally have it kind of be this big deal, right? And then kind of almost flop in the end because that's kind of reality. And we can kind of see that now with certain like atrocities and photographs and people just kind of being like, "Oh," and then moving on. But then later on in history, those photographs usually are very powerful and used to make sure it doesn't like happen again or hope to have it not happen again or kind of open people's eyes. And so it kind of reminded me of like South African like apartheid. And it also reminded me of um, just getting the truth out there takes time to change people's minds and get people to actually care. And so making sure that photographs are kept was very important and not destroyed so the evidence is actually still there. And I think even Maali mentions that I wanted one of my photographs to be like the Napalm Girl moment for Vietnam, right? And so, um, I think photos do invoke, but then also you have to have the people to pay attention. So I think it was kind of purposeful that only the dead really were paying more attention to those photos in the beginning, and it started to get a little bit more traction once. Didn't like a famous person kind of mention it in a newspaper or something? I was also kind of checked out at that point of reading the book. But and then got more traction and then more international attraction by sending the negative somewhere else. And so I think it was purposeful because I think we were supposed to feel disappointed a little bit, just like how real life kind of happens when these atrocities occur. Um, so
Yeah, I agree with you guys. And I think, Grace, you hit it right on the head for me. Um, yeah, most people unfortunately didn't really care. Um, and then like Molly was saying, it seems like people were more interested in the pretty photos than they were in the photos that actually showed the gruesome realities of the Sri Lankan people, which unfortunately, I mean, not to make it about myself or about America, because the book is not about America, but we see a very similar thread in our own country. People really don't care about like the more gruesome stuff. They don't want to see it. Although obviously that is what we need to see in order to really wake us up to the harsh realities that some people are facing. Um, so it's disappointing, but again, it like you were saying, Grace, it's totally realistic. I don't know if I would necessarily buy a story where these photos magically change the government and the whole world has changed and everyone is saved and they're all living in peace and harmony. That's really not realistic, unfortunately. As much as that would have been a fun read, it's just not realistic. Um, so yeah, the ending of him really not getting much success with trying to bring down the corruption just kind of makes the most sense. And it's even more unfortunate that the many people that he's trying to call out with his photos, Johnny, Bob, the minister, those people all just essentially steal the photos and have them taken down. Um, that's unfortunate, but mm. Then part of me is curious, like, why exactly were the photos just his initials as opposed to like his full name? Um, Not that I think he was trying to do that for fame, but it does kind of seem like, wouldn't there be a bit of a connection for most people? This photographer, photojournalist who went missing and was reported dead. He's responsible for these photos that clearly show a lot of the important figures of Sri Lanka doing really hypocritical and messed up things. I'm curious why it was just the initials, but whatever. Um, Now, this is a question that the author kind of poses to his readers. How much or how little do you think Molly grew throughout the story, and could this growth have happened if he hadn't died?
yeah, unfortunately, with a lot of things, I feel like a big change in people's lives, like a near death or death experience, takes that to kind of shake people out of their day to day like assumptions or like just day to day goings. And I felt like Maali probably wouldn't have changed very much, especially if he moved to San Francisco. Just like you said earlier, Jonathan, he probably would have moved to San Francisco and he would have had so much sex his dick would have fallen off. So I just don't think there would have been any real big changes at all. Unless Maali had to experience something so traumatic like death or maybe a near death experience or something to kind of shake him out of his selfishness. Um, and it still took how many moons of being dead for Maali to actually then start to change his ways and try to help other people and try to stop, you know, and so, for that kind of progress to be had. And so, yeah, I don't think Maali would have changed much without some sort of shakeup in his life that was pretty traumatic or at least severe enough to have him kind of think about it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, um, yeah, no, I have nothing else to add. Grace said it perfectly. Um, he needed a wake-up call to get to change. He got it. I mean, what's more of a wake-up call than dying, right? Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like Arian said, Grace, you said it perfectly. That question reminds me a lot of the conversation we had when we read Don't Cry for Me a few months back. Uh, Death is really something that puts things into perspective for a lot of people. It shows us how fragile life is. It shows us what's most important, the people that are most important to us, whether that be in this story, the person actually dying, or in that story, someone having a near death experience. I would also even argue that the similar sentiment could be said for someone who's been around a lot of death or experiences the loss of a loved one. You go through a very similar emotional process. So unfortunately, I do think Maali had to die. I mean, you just kind of have to see how unimportant a lot of the bullshit that you think is so important to you really is, in order for you to realize, okay, this is what life is actually about. Um, so yeah. Now, on that note, that is all I have in my notes. Before we move on to our discussion for next month's books, does anyone have any last minute questions, comments, concerns, characters they want to go over, plot lines they want to go over? Anything?
I had something quick that I don't know if it was brought up that I was just curious like if people what people thought about that demon that was protecting the president or whatever his name was. I thought that was really interesting and that bombing everyone died, but that demon like saved him and just keeps saving him even though he's like a crappy person. Um I just thought that was really interesting to add in there, almost like the author was trying to say something with that too, being like these people that are in power might be there for a reason because they have like nefarious things protecting them and keeping them alive, even when they shouldn't be alive anymore. I was just curious what people thought about that character in there and that kind of plot point.
Okay, in context of the story, I don't know. Did they give it a reason? Like, did they give a reason why there's like an evil ghost following him around anywhere? I don't know. But like, I think it kind of makes sense if they're trying to hammer in like, oh, um, not bad things don't happen to bad people, I guess, or like it doesn't always happen to them. Um, yeah, that's what I took away from it.
That's an interesting question, Grace, that I hadn't really thought of too much. In regards to your question, though, I do remember at one point Molly saying that truly evil people are evil because they have evil spirits whispering in their ear to carry out their evil. So I think that was the point of including the demon. It's interesting to me that as evil as the demon is, the demon does essentially save Molly's soul. Had it not been for that demon, Molly would have stayed in the Mahakali. And I do have one correction to what you said about the demon saving the minister. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Molly is the one that saves the minister. Because I remember after the bomb happens, Sana is upset with Molly because three of them are meant to die and only two of them did. So I believe it's Molly who saves the minister. Could be wrong, but I believe that's true. Um, and that poses another very interesting thing. Why exactly did that happen? I mean, we know that Molly wanted to bring the minister down so bad. Why would you save him? That's interesting. I wonder if it was because he wanted to, like, he was hoping the minister would see some kind of like actual punishment in life. But unfortunately, because the minister is in power, he stays in power and he's able to explain away the Department of Justice bombing. So unfortunate ending, but is also, like we said earlier, very realistic. So, okay. Anyone else? Anything else? And once, twice. Okay. Now for your little X. Now for the month of July, I have two picks like usual. Um, one, Grace, I think you'll probably lean more towards since we were discussing male authors who write very flat female characters. The first book I have for us as an option is called Mongrel. I will post a link in the chat. From what I've gathered online, all the reviews and all the talk about it, if you like books about women, this one is the one to read because it's all female focused, female author, all of the things. So, and the second one is called No One Can Pronounce My Name. I will post that link in the chat as well. Just a sec. Okay, read the synopsises of both books and let me know which one you guys are leaning towards. I already kind of have my mind on one, but let's see if you guys make the right choice.
I think Mongrel is interesting. I'm kind of leaning towards Mongrel.
Also leaning towards Mongrel.
Okay, so to unanimous, we will read Mongrel next month. Um, Now, one warning I have to give with this book, of course, everyone's library access is going to be different, but for my library, I don't have access to this book. I do, however, have a PDF copy. So if you are experiencing a similar difficulty in finding the book, let me know on Discord and I will send you a PDF copy that I have. But outside of that, I don't think you should have any other issue. Um, yeah. So just a heads up on that. But if you need a PDF copy, let me know on Discord. I'll send it to you. Okay. So like always, I was thinking last Sunday of the month, which let me double check, will be the 27th. Does that work for people? July 27th?
Yes, that works for me.
All good.
Cool. And the usual time of 12 p.m. PST?
Yes, that works for me.
Yeah, that should still work as well.
Cool. Okay, well, it's all settled. Mongrel for July 27th at 12 p.m. PST. Before we sign off, does anyone have any last minute questions, comments, concerns about this book, about next month's book, Mongrel, about the club, anything?
Just the usual thanks for organizing the meeting and all the work that you put in.
Yeah, same. It's always so much fun. I look forward to this every month. And it makes me finish books that I wouldn't. So that's great.
Real.
Well, thank you both for saying that. It always, of course, means so much to hear how much you guys are enjoying this, but I'm not the only one. And yeah, Grace, totally there with you. A lot of the books we've read recently, I probably wouldn't have finished. This book, unfortunately, I would have put down probably after about page 20.
Yeah.
So nice to know I'm not alone there. Um, okay, and of course, always thank you guys for coming. I mean, this club only really works if you guys come. So you guys are equally as important as I am to how this club function. Okay, well, I will see you guys next month to discuss Mongrel. Until then, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Or I think it's Monday for you, Arian, so enjoy your Monday.
Thank you. See
Bye-bye.
y'all.
See ya.